Okay, YouTube viewers, here we are back with the Cannondale SC600 update. And what I've got, of course, I've redone the cassette, put a 12 by 28 cassette on, and I've re-greased the bearings in the rear wheel. So we have a couple videos on that. And today we are going to focus on the crank. Okay. It's got a 5342, which is not the best for hilly terrain or anybody that wants to keep a high cadence. So what I've done is I've purchased a used compact crank. This one was an old 105 compact. I bought it with several pieces. The guy updated his bike with Ultegra or Dura-Ace and just wanted to get rid of this stuff, so I got a pretty good deal. I paid about $100 for the crank, the drifters, the brakes, and I think a few other pieces, so it was a good price. They're in good condition. This is a 50-34 crank setup, so the big gear is a 50 tooth and the small gear is a 34, known as a compact. Now the question is, will it fit on this bike? So the good thing about these older bikes is they usually all come with a English bottom bracket, which is a 68mm wide bottom bracket. It was kind of a standard. There were others, but that was the most common. And so this bearing set right there is 68mm, and so it will fit in this frame. And the other thing you need to check, of course, is, are the bearings in good shape? The best way to check the bearings is just to feel them as it turns. Of course, I'm one-handed here, but these feel real solid. There's appears to be a lot of grease in them. It does come apart. It's a real simple setup. It just screws into the frame, and then you slide the crank through and bolt the other side on. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so we're going to get started. First thing we're going to need is a couple of tools. So this cover needs to come off. This one just has a slot in it. I'm using a little slotted tool to pry it off. Some of them have two holes in it, and you can have a special tool for that, or just get two small spikes and carefully turn it off. Those are threaded. This one's just kind of snapped on there in place. I'm going to set that aside. Next we have a 14mm bolt. So we'll just put that on there, and it's standard threaded. Okay, so we'll just spin that one out. So we take the bolt out, set it aside, and then what we're left with is a press fit. Actually, there's a washer in there too. There it is. Press fit square taper. So I have a special tool. This one is a Park CCP22 tool. There's several different types. They're not expensive. What it does is it threads into the crank. Give it a few turns. Doesn't have to be all the way in, but get it on there good and tight. And then the, of course, if the pedal's off, it's easier, but you just turn this down. And once it seats against the axle, you just give it a little turn. Now this one's been on probably for a long time, so it could be a bit tight. Alright, it's starting to move. I can feel it. If you have to, you know, you can put some sort of extension on there, but usually you can get it. Alright, so I can feel it coming loose now. Off the crank comes. And I just set the chain aside like that, and there's the crank. Square taper. Just undo the tool, and you see the square taper bottom bracket. We'll take the crank off the other side using the same tool. It's the same idea. I'll just do that, and then I'll show you how we can remove the bottom bracket. Okay, so we've got the cranks removed. Taking them off, I'm just setting them aside for now. The next tool I'm going to use is it's a Park tool. It's just the one I happen to have. It's a HCW-4. And the part we're going to use is this 36mm wide wrench end here. So what happens is it goes on the bottom bracket like that, and then these are reverse threaded on the right hand side, which means to loosen it you turn it clockwise, to tighten it you turn it counterclockwise. So I need to turn this wrench this way. I did loosen it a little bit, and so we're just going to undo this. And you never know what's going to come out of here. Sometimes there's water in there. If the bike's been outside much, water can go down the tubes and this is where it'll settle. Okay, so there's the bearings. They're in very good shape. So now we'll remove the other side. This is the axle. Of course it's loose, so I can just take it out. That's kind of dodgy. So that's the old style axle, and we're going to go with the new style, which is hollow, so which will weigh much less than this. This is quite heavy. I don't have a problem with these though. These bearings last a long time. These things have lasted for years, but you know, the industry moves on and you got to move with it. Alright, let's go to the other side. Okay, so I've turned the bike around. I've got my other tool here. This one is a park tool also. It's a HCW5. It's what I have. And so this one, there's a lock ring here, and this one is threaded normally. In other words, you do it counterclockwise to unscrew it and clockwise to tighten it up. So you hook it on these notches, and I've already broken it loose, but it just spins around, and then you take the lock ring off. So that's the lock ring. Now I'm left with this. I have a couple of these tools, a Park SPA1 and SPA2. Okay, and they're just little, they have little pins on them that will connect into these little holes like that, and then I can just turn them. Now this one was loose, so I probably could have just spun it off by hand, but sometimes they're tight. Sometimes, like I said, if there's water or any kind of corrosion in there, these things won't come out very easy. This bike was obviously stored indoors because it's very clean there, and there's the cup and there's the bearings inside there. They look really good. Not much wear on these, so if we look in there, I don't know, let me take the camera for a moment. If you look in there, you can see that it's quite clean in there, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to take just a clean paper towel and get the excess grease out of there, and then we'll put in our new bottom bracket and crank. Alright, so I'm back again, and one thing I noticed on this one, when I took it apart, there was a ridge right here, and that is not good. Sometimes this the lock nut will dig into the frame, especially these aluminum frames, these Cannondales. So there was a bit of a ridge there. Hopefully that won't happen to yours when you do it, but if it does, just take a nice fine flat file. I know people will probably say, "You're crazy, what are you doing?" And just with a light hand like this, file that ridge down, get it nice and smooth. It doesn't take much. Aluminum is a soft metal. And then of course take a clean rag, wipe out any shavings or anything that can get caught in there, and then just make sure it's a nice smooth surface. So what I'm going to do now is put this bottom bracket in. It's external bearing bottom bracket. It's for the crank that I got, and I don't know if you can see it, but on here there's a left and right. It's marked left and right. So what you want to do is, if you're standing on top of the bike like you're ready to ride it, your left hand is the left side of the bike. So this is the left side of the bike, and this says left is that way. So we're going to go ahead and put this in. It's real simple. It just threads in, and of course these have a little bit of some sort of compound on the threads, I guess, to keep them from loosening up. It may be some sort of Loctite. I don't think it is actual Loctite, but there's something on there, and there's enough on there to where I can just go ahead and tighten this back up and it should stay just fine. Okay, the tool I'm using, this is from Nashbar. I mean, they're good for home use. Shop use, I wouldn't recommend them, but for home use they'll work. And this is just a tool to grab hold of these external bearing bottom brackets and just go ahead and tighten them back on. I don't know what else you would want to use to do this. I wouldn't recommend channel locks or anything like that. That's a recipe for messing stuff up. Now, how tight does that need to be? Well, you definitely don't want it to be snug or just hand tight. You want to really, this tool is fairly big, so that tells you that you're probably going to have to put a little bit on it. So I think just snug like that, that's not going anywhere. Alright, I'm going to turn the bike around and get the other side up. Alright, so the bike's turned around. Got the other half, the bottom bracket external bearing here. And one thing you want to make sure is you clean that up, especially, I mean, the new one you won't have to clean, but these are used, so I just cleaned up any grease that was in here. Make it nice and tidy. Check the bearing. It's nice and smooth. And so you just screw this one in. Now the thing you got to remember, you'll start going like this and you'll be like, yeah, why isn't this thing working? Got to remember, this is the right side of the bike. It's backwards thread. So you turn it counterclockwise to tighten it. Alright, and so away we go. And it's most likely just, it's a little snug because of the compound that's on these threads. But that's actually not a bad thing because we don't want these coming undone when we're riding a bike. That wouldn't be good. Alright, that's nice and snug. There they are. I reach in here and make sure that everything's right, the bearings are smooth. And now the fun part. Take the crank and see, it's just a hollow tube basically. It's much lighter. This whole thing is probably as light as that axle, so that's why technology moves on. And so we want to pull the chain around because we want the chain to be on the chain rings when we go through. So I'll just pull the chain over there, hang on to the bike a little bit, and slide that on. Alright, so I'll put the chain on the small ring, as much as I can anyway. The only thing left I have to do here is put the other arm on. And so I'll turn the bike around and we'll go through that and see how that works. Here's the other crank arm. Now you got to be careful here. It should be obvious, but sometimes it's not. You could sit here and go, oh yeah, I just need to put this on, and it doesn't fit right. Why isn't this working very good? Well, they've given you a notch on there so you don't put it on all silly. It only goes on when they're level, and that's the thing. They've kind of made it dummy proof, which is good because I'm not the brightest or sharpest tool in the shed. Okay, so the crank is on. It's like, well, how do I get the tension right? Because you don't want any back and forth play. Well, they give you this nice little tool. It's a little plastic screw type thing. It's got a Torx bit on here, and of course your Nashbar tool comes with the other side. So you put that on there, just like that, and then you just screw it in. And this is another thing that you don't want to get too tight. You just screw it in, and you kind of get a feel for, okay, well, how much is enough? Because this is just your end-to-end play. So the reason they give you this tool with this big round bit here is because you do it with your bare hand. You don't put a wrench on it, you don't do any of that. So I snug it up tight with my hand. Okay, now that's tight. There's no play, but it might be too tight. So let me just back it off a bit. You know, it doesn't have to be so tight. Alright, now I feel just a squidge of play. So I'll snug it back up, and so you just kind of get a feel for it. I mean, if you tighten it real tight, it's probably not going to hurt too much, but you want it to be just so. You want to get it just right. Alright, that feels pretty good right there. There's no play that I can feel, and it's hand tight. And that's what you want. Okay. So, the next thing would be to tighten the pinch bolts here. Now, these are 5mm. A lot of people have a tool like this, and that's fine. But when you go to turn it, sometimes it bumps into the frame and it gets in the way. So I just go with a standard L-shaped Allen wrench. Put that end in and just snug it. Alright, so just snug that one. And then I'll go around to the other side and do the same thing. Alright, so they're both snug now. Now, there are torque specifications for these. I just go back and forth. You want it to pinch evenly, so don't tighten up one real tight and then leave the other one not so tight. Just go back and forth. Get them until they're, you know, snug, but don't really wrench on these things. I mean, they don't have to be overly tight, but they do need to be quite snug. I guess that's not really, if you had a torque wrench, I'm thinking you'd put about 25 foot-pounds on it, but maybe 20. But you can do it by hand. Okay, there it is. Now I've got some adjustment to do on the derailleur, so we'll get around to that, but there you go. I mean, it's on the bike and it appears to be working.